Hurricanes can be unpredictable, devastating, and are unfortunately a part of life in South Florida. Predicting a hurricane's destructive path and informing the public about an approaching storm is crucial in protecting the property and lives of our citizens. We visited the National Hurricane Center in Miami to find out how they track storms, predict their path, and relay that vital information to millions of South Florida residents.
This Hurricane Center was designated by the United Nations World Meteorological Organization as a regional specialized meteorological center. There are a number of these regional centers around the world. We happen to be Region 4, and our area of responsibility goes from Africa on the eastern extreme to about 1,000 miles east of Hawaii at 140 west longitude. So we're responsible for the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific, and essentially what we do is we work with 24 other countries in the region to gather up information, and once we've done that, we synthesize that information into a forecast. We then send that information back to the countries. Now, they're being sovereign nations, they can elect to take our forecast or they can ignore our forecast. Generally, when you tell them a wall of water 17 feet high is coming to their island, they tend to pay attention.
Well, this is our public media briefing desk that we use to give the media the information that they in turn give to the public concerning our watches and warnings, any particular information that we feel is necessary for the public to have. We have the same capabilities as all of the television stations as far as displaying various pieces of data. For example, over my shoulder we have the satellite imagery. If I wanted to, I could quickly cut over to radar imagery that's being displayed in another part of the office. If I wanted to, I could even bring up the forecast model guidance from Hurricane Keith last year that moved across the Yucatan Peninsula. One of the significant things about this piece of data that you're seeing is that the storm actually tracked in a west-northwest direction, whereas at this particular time, none of the forecast models were indicating any kind of motion in a west-northwest direction. They were actually taking the storm to the northwest. So the computer models help, but they're not perfect. So we're able to use this particular location in the office to give live updates to all of the media outlets, whether they be cable networks or one of the regular networks or even local television networks. We can give this public specific information as we receive the information in from perhaps reconnaissance aircraft, or as you can see over my shoulder here, perhaps giving more specific positions on the location of the center of a hurricane based on radar data. This was Hurricane Brett from 1999 as it moved across the southern Texas coast. So we can give people very detailed information, even to the point where we could say there are hurricane watches along the coast from just north of the Brownsville area all the way up to Corpus Christi. During a landfalling hurricane situation for the United States, in particular, if a hurricane is approaching South Florida, this area will become very, very busy. There will be media representatives here with cameras out on the operations floor area, trying to get interviews with the hurricane specialists or other people here so that they can get information as quickly as they possibly can to the public. That conference room back there that is empty during a landfalling situation will be completely filled with cameras and media to the point where you're literally elbow to elbow back there.
We have satellite pictures, we have radar pictures, we have the output of personal computers, we have the output of supercomputers in Washington. All these different sources, unfortunately, scan at a different rate. So if you transition from one image to another, you get that very funny roll bar effect. So we had to develop a system, a way of being able to go from one 82 frame per second image to a 30 frame per second image. Well, they've now invested in a number of converters, they're called scan rate converters. They convert all of these to a common 30 frames per second. This allows us then to display for the public all of the information that we have. And what's important for the media is that same information can be fed out of the building either by fiber optic cable or by microwave or by their satellite trucks to get that information to the public. And it is a significant tool in our ability to brief people.
Okay, what I'm doing at the present time is I'm preparing a practice exercise for the state of Florida emergency managers. This is a hurricane exercise. We do this every year. This is one of two that we'll be conducting this year for the Florida emergency managers. And basically what it does is it gives the emergency managers an opportunity to look for any glitches or problems that they might have in their preparedness system. So I have to actually go in and create a fake storm, so to speak, but it has all the bells and whistles of a regular storm and includes all of the advisories. So I have to go in and bring up the storm first on our map. This is a storm that I've created in the Gulf of Mexico. And then I have to prepare a forecast. From that, I then take and create all of the four products, the public advisory, the forecast discussion, the probabilities forecast, as well as what we call the forecast advisory, which used to be a marine forecast product, but now it's used by the various media outlets. So where I'm eventually going to take this storm, this practice storm, is run it up through the Yucatan Channel into the southeast Gulf of Mexico and then take it just north of the Tampa Bay area. A lot of people are not aware that Tampa Bay is very susceptible to high storm surges because of the shape of the bay. On average, if you go back and look at the statistics, Tampa gets hit by a major hurricane about once every 33 to 40 years. So that particular part of the state is long overdue for a strike from a major hurricane. Could it be this year? Can't say. Next year? 10 years from now? Eventually, however, that part of Florida will receive another major hurricane strike. The difference is the last time that Tampa received a hit by a major hurricane, the population was less than 1/10 of what it is right now. So you have more building, you have more property to be damaged, you also have more lives endangered, in particular on the outer areas of the Pinellas County coastline. What the public needs to understand about storm surge, first of all, is that storm surge has the greatest potential for producing the largest loss of life. Storm surge covers a very large coastal area. It can come up very quickly, the water can rise very quickly, and last for more than 3 hours. What storm surge is not, is it's not a tidal wave or a tsunami. What we're dealing with here is when you take a tropical cyclone, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, but in particular if it's a very intense hurricane, the winds spiraling around the storm in a counterclockwise direction will pile up the water on the side in the direction that the storm is moving. That's generally going to be the right side of the storm. So if a storm is moving from east to west, that would be the north side of a storm. If a storm was moving from south to north, that would be the east side of the storm. But it's always the right side of a storm relative to the storm's motion, where the winds push on the water and actually cause the water to rise up. That's what we refer to as storm surge. It's not a single large ocean wave. It's actually a very large dome, several hundred miles in diameter, that just rises up, and then the water height will increase even more as it moves near a coastal area, because the water coming in at the top overruns the water trying to move out at the bottom, because what we call the continental shelf, particularly as you get in the Gulf of Mexico, where the continental shelf is very gradual, as opposed to the east coast of Florida, where the continental shelf is very steep, where it comes up very sharply, that water can rise up to heights in excess of 20 feet above mean tide levels, meaning that if a storm surge of 20 feet was to come across an area at high tide, and high tide is normally 2 feet, then the total water depth will be 22 feet above what we call mean sea level. High tide is 2 feet above mean sea level. If it was to come at low tide, and let's say low tide was 2 feet below sea level, then a 20-foot storm surge on top of that would produce a height of water 18 feet above mean sea level. If your house is 15 feet above mean sea level, you're going to have 3 feet of water in your house. And you have to remember that the wind is pushing this water, and water is much heavier, much more dense than air is, so it creates a greater force on structures. The problem that you're dealing with storm surge is that once people maybe see the water rising up and they want to leave and evacuate the area, that same height of water may have already covered over their escape routes, the various roads or bridges and what have you, and now they're trapped, and then the water may continue to rise, and unfortunately that's how you get flooding deaths.
The city of Pompano Beach has its own emergency operations center where city officials remain before and during a hurricane to coordinate emergency efforts. Assistant Fire Chief Harry Small, emergency manager for the city, works closely with the Broward County Network and National Hurricane Center meteorologists to get the latest advisories and coordinate city services to prepare for a hurricane. Your title is actually Pompano Beach Assistant Fire Chief. Who is in charge during a hurricane, and what is your title in that facility?
My job is to coordinate the emergency management in the community through all the departments of the city. The city of Pompano Beach is a large entity. There's a lot of departments, police, fire, water, recreation. My job is to coordinate all those departments in conjunction with the city staff and the city manager to make sure that everything functions no matter what the conditions are.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Emergency Operations Center for the City of Pompano Beach?
The Emergency Operations Center, or EOC as it's referred to now, is a center that is designed for government officials to be able to come in and run the city out of a common center. If the infrastructure of a community is destroyed, you lose all electricity, all water, all supplies. All the typical offices and buildings where you normally run your city business are no longer available to you. They may be damaged, they may not have any support to them. In this facility here, all the department heads can come in. They'll have, we don't see them here right now, we have computers that we would transfer in here. They would have a computer workstation, telephone access, fax machines, a certain amount of their departmental access files here, and they can run their department from this center right here. So that if we lose all the facilities, which would be unlikely, but if we were to lose the ability to use our facilities in the city of Pompano, we could come into this EOC and hunker down here and take care of city business. It's very important to be able to run the city under any conditions, regardless of the disaster. So by having everyone in here, we can make decisions quickly. We keep a continuity of command. The city manager can be in here along with anyone else that he needs to have handy, and we make the decisions right here.
How do you interact with the National Hurricane Center when a storm approaches?
Well, the National Hurricane Center, which is part of the Tropical Prediction Center down in Miami, their job is to coordinate all of the hurricane advisories for this hemisphere, and that they do very well. They are directly linked to Broward County, and we are directly linked to Broward County. Broward County has a update conversations, usually telephone conversations with them every few hours. Then we get on the phone, all the municipalities in Broward County, and we have conversations with Broward County, and that information is passed along. We could also access the National Hurricane Center by the internet, and we have the ability to do that, although as time is going on, as a hurricane moves in, the internet becomes crowded and it's harder and harder for everyone to get on. We additionally have our own software and our own hurricane tracking stuff where we go through private companies that also do satellite tracking of these storms so we can have a backup system.
Do you rely solely on the National Hurricane Center, or do you have other means of forecasting a storm?
Well, there's in this day and age now, there are so many sources of information that has gone from being a high priority problem in the past to being one that we've almost resolved pretty well. Just about the common citizen almost has as high tech of warnings as anyone else does. We have our connections with the National Hurricane Center. As I said, we have an internet system software that tracks the storms through the National Weather Service and gives us updates there. But we probably aren't a whole lot ahead of the people watching the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel is very sophisticated. People demand information right away. So we're just maybe slightly ahead of everyone else. But the nice thing about it is that there's a lot of information out there, and it's no longer a problem getting it. The problem that we run into is people trying to outthink the storm, and that you can't do.
The people out there watching this probably didn't have an idea that there was an EOC in the city. Tell us a little bit about what goes on here and how that affects the people out in Pompano Beach.
Well, as I said earlier, a city is a large enterprise, and people rely on their city services daily. It's not something you use once in a while. Your water, your utilities, your infrastructure, and your whole community. And your cities, your municipalities have the job of running that, of course, as the county government also. We can't just allow ourselves to be put out of business. We have to be able to function and preserve our community to the extent humanly possible, and that means that we can't be disorganized. We have to be organized and be in one place where we can run the city. It's a large operation, as I said before. If we have a bridge out, if we lose water to a certain area, if we have dangers out there, it's our job to try to keep the public safe and get them resolved as quickly as possible. By being in an emergency operations center or an EOC, as we talked about, we have a place that we can count on that's going to be there. Now, sometimes the facility can be crude. But if it's got electric generator backup and we've got everything we need, we can still function and run the city, which is what it's all about. We have an obligation to make sure that the residents are safe. So one of the things that we'll do right after a hurricane is we try to get out and assess the damage in the community as fast as humanly possible so we can identify the areas that we want to put off limits to people so they won't get hurt. We are also the primary mechanism by which resources and help for our community come in. We are the ones that assess our community, pass that information on to the county, who pass it on to the state, who pass it on to the federal government. There's a state and federal declaration by the governor and president when we have a disaster, and funds and help start coming in. If we weren't here and assessing the damage and coordinating things, we wouldn't get anything. One of the things that we saw in Hurricane Andrew was that the communities that weren't prepared and they didn't have assessments done, truck after truckload of supplies and help went to the next community. They didn't have time to wait around to see if someone was ready for it. So we want to be as ready as possible. We have had the opportunity to learn a lot from things like Hurricane Andrew.
There was a high degree of confidence that Hurricane Andrew was definitely going to hit South Florida. Now, was it going to be Dade County only, Broward County, or Palm Beach County? That's difficult to say. That's why they had to put up hurricane warnings all the way up to just about the Melbourne area. But at least the storm forecast track was narrowed down to roughly the South Florida area. So there are times when there are going to be some uncertainties, considerable uncertainties in the forecast track. Even when a storm is, let's say, relatively well behaved and it's moving in a general track, we saw 2 years ago with Hurricane Floyd what the difference of just a few miles one way or the other can result in effects on the coastal areas. Floyd stayed about 80 to 90 miles off the east coast of Florida. If it had just moved 40 miles further west, we would have had hurricane force winds all up and down the east coast of Florida.
People are responsible for their own safety at a very basic level. Now we try, one of the advantages we have with a hurricane makes us a little bit different than the rest of the country is that we can see this disaster coming. And one would think we would be better prepared for it than we are. Unfortunately, people try to outguess the storm. They don't evacuate when they should. They figure because this is a disaster you can see coming, there's no point in stocking up on anything. I'll just go to the store when the time comes. Now, I think most veterans of South Florida know that you don't do that, not unless you want to stand in line for hours and not get what you need, not to mention the fact that it gets pretty expensive doing that. The idea is to understand that this is a hazard to the area we live in, that you need a hurricane plan. You need to know what you're going to do. You need to take action. If you're going to ride it out, you need to know whether you're in a storm surge evacuation area. If you're going to stay and it's safe, you have the right supplies. A lot of people's homes will survive, but they're not livable in after the storm because the utilities are gone and there may be a foot of water on the floor, you know, so you have to think about those things. There is ample material that's out, that's published every year, including materials that we hand out here in the city of Pompano Beach, that would make a resident pretty much aware about everything they needed to know to be prepared for hurricanes. All you have to do is read it, take advantage of it, do the things, the steps that are identified, and you'll usually be okay. Evacuation notices, which are a big concern, are ignored very often by a lot of people. And then in the last minute they get scared and they try to crowd the roads and run and they get caught in the storm. In Hurricane Andrew, we were going up and down A1A on the beach in Pompano trying to get people to leave, and we had a lot of people that would not leave. And these are people who were sick, frail, and we didn't suspect that they would survive, and it took a lot of effort to get them off the beach. That we're not a luxury we're not going to have as we get a larger population and more things that we have to do. So that's a big issue. But people can be prepared for hurricanes and they can survive very nicely.